Harry Horsfall, co-founder and CEO of Flight 3. Welcome to the show.
Awesome. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me, Peter. We are enjoying a very rare sunny day in London.
That's amazing. I was in London 6 months ago and had a blast. Um, Actually, it was probably longer. My wife is a big Taylor Swift fan, and took her to Wembley to see Taylor, and it was a lot of fun. So I am not a Taylor, I am not a Swiftie, but she is. So I'm just supporting her. But London's a beautiful place, wonderful. Um, Tell us about so Flight 3. Let's get into Flight 3 in a minute, but would love to
Yeah.
hear kind of like how you got into crypto. Um, and kind of your views on kind of where we are in the market, and you work with lots of projects. Want to hear kind of like what you're seeing in the space.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think to take that question in two parts, what we're seeing right now is irrationally, the markets are irrationally negative for how positive the market is. If
Mm,
you look at the requests we're getting as an agency, they're growing up. The market is starting to understand what marketing is. We're starting to see, if we take credit cards and payment cards, there's about 100 are launching every week at the moment, you know, different cards. And that's one of those moments where marketing can really help, isn't it? There's always a big gap between, if you have to tell someone, I spent a long time working selling an exchange and a wallet product. If you have to educate people what Bitcoin is, what a wallet is, it's a lot of your marketing dollars and spend and ideas time just to educate why I need a wallet. What is a wallet? I've got a wallet in my pocket. No, this is a digital wallet. You store coins. So we're seeing a lot of products that are almost ready to start talking about on their right to win
mm,
versus just what they are. Um, so to go back to the first point of the question, for me, I've been lucky enough to stumble upon crypto, I guess, when I was at uni in 2011, and messed around with Bitcoin without really knowing what it was. I was running a music festival actually at the time, and as the music festival scaled, they actually make less money. So I'm 21, 22, and I was going to work for a VC, and we were running a tech conference. We had a sort of a Bitcoin panel and a Bitcoin event part of it, and we've got this guy called Paul Gordon who made CoinScrum, which was the OG Bitcoin meetup, and probably knew some of the smartest very early Bitcoiners. And I was just like, wow, this is it. I cannot believe I've just discovered this. This is like, because when you've already used something, and I think we'll touch back on this in our marketing later. Like when you've used something and you like kind of have gone through the motion of making a wallet, putting Bitcoin in it, it's a lot easier to gauge in your head than to actually work out, well, what is a SUI token? How do I put it
mm,
in a wallet if you've never done that? So obviously Mount Gox happened, and I was like, right, I'm an idiot. I've just chewed off everyone's ear that this is the future, and carried on working in marketing for startups. Big companies like Facebook and Betfair and Paddy Power, where I learned a lot about like user acquisition. And if we look in a lot of what gambling marketing and exchange marketing, I think quite similar in the sense the lifetime value of a customer is very high. Once you're onboarded to a Binance or a Coinbase, unless they don't have the tokens you want, or unless they block a payment method that you want, it's unlikely that, or they put their fees too high, it's unlikely that you're going to leave once you're in their funnel. So and then cut our teeth in helping scale Luno, which is kind of like the Coinbase of Africa.
mm.
So a very very early Coinbase, very easy to use exchange for the masses to onboard. So I spent a lot of time educating people. This is what a wallet is, and in South Africa and Nigeria and Malaysia, they're some of the most regulated, and there's a real use case there. Sometimes when we're in London, a pound is a pound overnight. The rand really suffers with inflation. They've got capital controls in their country, so it's a really really easy use case. And then I joined when there was 30, 40 people, and there was about 1,000 when I left mid COVID. I think wanting to go deeper into use, that entry point is a very exciting point. I think there's a lot more to it, and so I wanted to jump a little bit deeper.
Mhm. No, let me maybe we can double click on your time with that exchange in Africa. What Tell us what challenges you saw, or I guess what are some of the things that you saw that most people outside of Africa like do not see? You mentioned a couple of things around capital controls. Like tell us about the opportunity there that maybe many
Yeah,
of us aren't don't realize.
the opportunities are so high. If you think about, there's the obvious one is banking the unbanked. Like for something to be better, it needs to be 10 times better. In many ways, in England, Revolut and Monzo are great. Revolut even has crypto now. Most of us have a passport, most of us have a fixed address, and so most of us can get a bank account. And also, brands like Santander, HSBC invest in trying to get a Londoner to get a bank account. A lot of the first part of a bank account is like sunk costs before you eventually buy insurance or a mortgage or all of these things. There's a whole segment of people in that part of the world that are unbanked, don't have the correct documents, and within seconds they can open a crypto wallet, and that
Hmm.
can then allow them to freelance on the internet, become a graphic designer, become a writer, and access to this whole world of labor. So that's a really interesting point. Banking the unbanked. I think the second point is the capital controls and moving money in and out of country securely. And the fees, and then the third point is obviously a lot of my team hold their payment in dollars because they're worried about the changing of the price of the rand to the pounds, and they'd rather be paid in a global currency that's a little bit more stable. So I think those 3 points were really interesting. One of the biggest challenges we faced at Luno was the founder was, you know, rightly so, really believed that this was going to become a regulated space.
Hmm.
The problem with what that we faced in 17, 18, 19, even 20 was that there was no regulation. So if you're trying to be really regulated and there's no regulation to follow, you end up just going round and round. And so, the approach Binance took was, well, damn it, we'll pay let's get as big as we can and then we'll pay the consequences.
Yeah.
And, we saw that with CZ, obviously. But if you want to be regulated, I think one of the really early challenges we faced was going round and round in circles. And when you work in gambling marketing, or if you work in fintech, you'd say, APY 22%. This is a financial product. All of your money's at risk, and
Hmm.
it's like, well, do we have to put that on our marketing, or do we not? We don't even believe this is real. So I think those early challenges about communication, and how we do that, it's quite good. So one time we got a little bit of trouble for putting a joke on a bus ad, but
Oh, really?
it,
And was this in
yeah,
Africa?
no, this was actually in London by the FCA. So,
Oh, in
so, so
London.
I think that early stage of, are we allowed to say this? Are we not allowed to say this? Personally, I think like a risk warning is really important. Like
Hmm.
it's, if your DeFi protocol is offering 1,000% APY, or if you're investing into a TGE or an IDO, and it can go 1,000x, there's all probably higher chances going to zero, isn't it?
Hmm.
There's that risk tolerance that the right people need to take at the right time, based on what they want to do. And I think giving that information is positive.
Yeah, I think having those disclosures, especially in light of very little regulation and or guidance. And we face this in the United States, right? There is no regulation, and there's very little guidance, and there was a lot of uh, you know really retribution against lots of crypto projects that were trying to do the right thing, yet they still
Yeah,
got penalized for trying to do the right thing. Um,
definitely. I mean, it's an exciting time in the US, though, isn't it?
it
Like I'm
is.
seeing the mayor of New York is, you know,
Hmm.
growing up in the space, I was sent all of the FUD.
Yeah.
2017, India's banning it. 2018, China's kicked all the miners out. Da, da, da. It was negative, negative news. And then
Exactly.
what happened is Switzerland entered the race, and they were like, "We're going to lead this."
Yeah.
And then Portugal were like, oh, come to us. And then you had Dubai and UAE and Abu Dhabi be like, oh, we're interested. And then
Yeah.
suddenly the US are like, hang on a moment, guys, can you come back over here? So
Yeah.
I think I'm seeing a lot of my clients who were, I mean, where people are based is such a in a global world moving. I mean, we're all on a event tour half the year, but where
Hmm.
people are based and where they are is interesting. But before, everyone was trying not to be in the US, and suddenly I've seen the shift this year of
Everyone
people
wants to
just
be here. Yeah.
back in the US. They're going to support you, and it's very interesting how at Denver last year it was like, this is how you get a UAE license. We're all going to UAE.
Hmm.
This year at Denver, it's like, come back, come back. That was a really interesting shift in a
Well,
year.
you're bringing up a really interesting point where there's really a contrast in sentiment with, crypto Twitter feels very bearish. People are down and they're depressed. Yet, from a regulatory perspective, like we've never been in this space before where everything seems to be moving in the right direction. And there's so many positive signals that are happening, yet I'm not really seeing it on crypto Twitter. What do you think is the cause for
Yeah.
the stark
So
contrast?
it's insane, and I spent a lot of time talking about this and thinking about this, and
Yeah.
it's so obvious to me what's happening. Firstly, retailer broke. Secondly, Bitcoin is at all-time high, give or take 2%. Like I think we're at 103, all-time high is 107. But mainstream mentions of Bitcoin is at the lowest point it's been for a long time on Google Trends. So what we're seeing is Bitcoin is absolutely rocketing, but your Uber driver is not talking about it. Your best friend from college is not shilling you Bitcoin because they don't have any. They're not investing at the moment themselves. So I think what that means to me, and my interpretation of that, is that like Michael Saylor, governments, the UAE, and other banks are buying a lot of Bitcoin, and
Hmm.
they've got their head around it. The early movers of the institutional world, they've got their head around it, and they're like, oh my god, this is mental. They're going through what we went through in 2013. They've just got more money than us.
Yeah.
Instead of going in with $2,000, they're going in with $2 billion. But if they've got 2 trillion, I mean, these are the grown-ups with like, they use the term AUM, and they've got like billions or trillions of dollars assets under management. And so what I think is, and what we're feeling from crypto Twitter, is people that have been here a long time, we've got a little bit of fatigue.
Hmm.
If you've been working on your project and you did a big raise in the 21 cycle, you've been running on that money for quite a long time now. ETH's back to, I mean, it's actually surged in the last 2 weeks, but ETH was basically that price, 1.7, 1.8. So in that 5 years, it's kind of stayed the same. That affects a lot of the DeFi and the protocols on there. So I think there's a little bit of fatigue of the people that have been, and anyone who's listening and who builds their own projects knows how full on it is managing a community and trying to get it to work and trying to find that product market fit. So
Hmm.
I think there's that aspect. Then I think there's the aspect of like, we almost got through the no men. We almost got through Gary Gensler.
Hmm.
The SEC actually lost the case to Ripple before Trump was even on the scene. He beat them. That was a very, very bullish point. But then Trump came in with this kind of optimism, but then he was so irrational with all his tariffs that, global companies were cutting their teams, like preparing, markets don't like uncertainty. So
Yeah.
I feel like, sorry, I feel like the uncertainty of the macroeconomics, because we're now we're a $3 trillion market,
Hmm.
give or take, and that's without the exchanges, etc. But I feel like it's big enough that it's now affected by the macro. But if I look below that, what I'm seeing is stablecoin adoption happening rapidly. And if we look at a company like Stripe, these companies, they've already got users. They've already got all the contacts. It takes 5 years to get a conversation going with a global corporate. They've
Hmm.
already got all these sort of this network and this thing, and I think the adoption, because I guess with stablecoins you don't need to. When I was at DevConnect, I asked 20 of the leading people in ETH what they thought ETH meant, and trying to edit that video together
Hmm.
was such a wide video because it's so many, it's endless, it's infinite possibilities. Whereas when it comes to stable coins, like dollars are digital most of the time anyway. Not that many people are holding $1 million in cash. They're holding it on a computer screen saying they've got it. They get yield, and the fact that they understand that it's a much easier adoption curve that they can start with.
Hmm. Let's transition to Flight 3. This is your company, your agency. Tell us who you serve and the types of services you guys provide. And I'd love to hear kind of the what you're seeing, what the needs are from some of these crypto projects.
Yeah, definitely. So Flight Three. So we're a full service Web3 marketing agency, and our goal really is to help you from naught to one. And it completely depends on the project. We do a lot of like community building, which can be across events, um, online, and then sort of growth and PR. It's been really interesting as we've grown over the. So we just had our fourth year, which is that is not long in it's not long in Web 2 agency land, but 4 years in Web 3 feels like a lifetime.
Yeah,
I love the meme.
congratulations. That's great.
Thank you. So there's lots of different aspects, depending because each project is very different. But I think our core goal is, I've used a lot of Web 2 agencies. London has a lot of very good agencies. And when I was growing up and I was using agencies and we had the budget, we were talking to these guys and we're like, so we're gonna be using MetaMask. And a lot of marketing is making things as simple as possible. And if you're talking to an agency that doesn't understand what you're doing, it's a lot of time to explain to them, and a lot of the things are being on trend because Web 2 marketing, Web 3 marketing, is there that much of a difference? Really, it's just similar skill sets just transferred into Web 3. So
Hmm.
with Solana, really, really exciting project. It's an L1, similar to Ethereum, but there's a lot of settlements. But they were an amazing, amazing project to work with when they were. We started like in the heart of the bear market, 22,
Mm.
mid SBF token. Their tokens at $9 or $10, and they really wanted to double down on the builders in that time. So a lot of these big foundations, they have a lot of capital, don't they? Because they've raised a lot, and they need to get it to their ecosystem. So more dApps are built on their thing, but it's obviously very hard to give out capital, as we know with governments. Governments want to give out money, but they don't want to give it to bad actors who are just abusing the system. So
Hmm.
in that project, we worked on something called Super Team. Super Team is like
Hmm.
a really localized hub, and we helped launch Germany and the UK, and found the lead, help build the websites, help make all the branding look really sharp, and help kickstart that community. And it's
Hmm.
been amazing watching them go on and win prizes. You're building all your local communities in a way that allows, when you're building, can you sense check my code? Can you vibe code
Hmm.
with me? Can you connect me to an audit firm? And that was an amazing project to
Yeah.
be part of.
Let's talk about that because that I've heard that. So I've interviewed lots of projects on Solana, and I know many of the folks, at the foundation. And I've heard one of the I've heard it over and over again that Super Team is one of the key differentiators of the Solana ecosystem because they meet developers where they are in their local communities. They have local support, and they're very focused on like they view builders not just as developers but actual business people and entrepreneurs. And I think that's quite unique versus let's say the Ethereum ecosystem, which is you know um, uh, doesn't really view developers as business builders or entrepreneurs so as much. But let's talk about how you guys help build the super team kind of structure and organization, because I think there's developer marketing is very hard, and super team seems to be a model that works. So maybe take us through kind of the thinking and how you guys went about building that with Solana.
Yeah, so I think if we think you're right, developer community building is really hard. And if we look at like the global event circuit, which I spend a lot of time on, it's great. It's really fun. We just got back from Token. It's a mental 4 days though, isn't it? And I think what the localized super teams do, one, they provide really fast grants to get you started. 2 grand, 5,000, 15,000. They try to get that out within 24 hours. So if you've got an idea, you can. That's not going to be enough to run a project, live your life. It's enough to give you that Kickstarter. The second thing is Akshay, who's the mastermind of it all, really understood the value of the localization. If in the UK, what they've done really well is they've got a weekly meet on a Friday where everyone can come and start to build that rapport. And then the third part is really building that community of people that you really begin to know. And it takes a long time. And at the start, I think they're up to 24 now. And so it's almost like you can go anywhere and be like, oh, I'm super team, and there will be someone there. But it's at its heart, it is true, and Solana really believe that it's the builders that they don't know what they're going to build yet, but they know they can build something on Solana, and their job is to try and make it as easy as possible. That and that being said, the main problem of foundation. The foundations are quite small, aren't they, for how big the companies are worth, and they're quite new. So the main problem a foundation suffers with is that if you are really hot, how do they know that you're hot compared to the other 1,000 people that have messaged them? So having these, they're almost like in-house KOL. I know it's not a great word, but in-house celebrities that are, Cap in the UK is the UK lead, and he's Mr. Solana of the UK. And so he's almost been given the ability to go to the UK, help the projects, and he's really good at that. But also be like, oh my God, you're the project. I'm going to connect you to Jupiter. I'm going to connect you to the foundation. And then in one moment, if you're building like a DEX aggregator plugin or whatever you're building, something to help reduce the cost of transactions. Very niche, but if you have 3 combos with the right people quickly, you can make things happen really quickly. And
who is this? Who is this again? The Mr. Solana in the UK. Who is that?
A guy called Cap, and so yeah, he was part of the agency, and then
Got it.
He as the project got bigger, he joined full time. So I think one of the things about something like a super team is and I think this about any marketing. When you're deciding whether you want an agency or an in-house team, really you're always going to need both.
Yeah.
Because an agency can do 95% brilliant work, but an agency's busy and has lots of different clients and it has expertise. But really, why Super Team does so well is they find, that Alex Scott, the guy in Dubai, is doing a fabulous job. They find someone that is so passionate about their cause and really is that community leader. And if you think of how much a KOL costs per tweet, suddenly you've got a KOL for a whole month, a whole year, just working and posting and going to the events. And what it gives you that real localized effect of if something needs to be fast tracked up and it's like a game changer, it can be. And then, of course, it's the support and getting ready for these hackathons. Because, as I say, all of these foundations, especially at the start, have a lot of capital that they need to allocate to make their ecosystem run. We saw with I worked on another big foundation, and they gave out lots of grants, but they were backing startups. And we know startups are tough. Just because you're building in Web3 doesn't mean that we're going to change the 9 out of 10 startups don't work.
Now, that main person in the specific geography, on the super team structure, is that person hired on full time?
Yeah,
got it.
They join full time. Yeah.
Okay, no, that kind of structure makes a lot of sense. When you're thinking about community building, one of the biggest challenges that projects have, and every project has this, they want to grow brand awareness, right? They want to be known. And so it first starts out with engagement, but then turning engagement into a real community is really hard.
Yeah.
How does Flight 3 think about that? And how have you helped
Yeah.
projects with that?
Yeah. So I think there's a big challenge, especially when we look at some of our earlier projects, that they're talking to top VCs, tier one VCs, tier two VCs, and they need these metrics to be taken seriously,
Hmm.
and so they want to growth hack them as quickly as possible. But vanity metrics are vanity metrics. If you're, like if you go back to Betfair days and we're looking at like how many people are doing bets, or at Luno, our magic number was, we got someone to KYC, we got someone to deposit, we got someone to do their first trade. Doing their third trade is a really far way down the funnel. If you think of joining a Discord, that's really high. I mean, you're off the internet and you're in a channel, but you're a long way from connecting your wallet, depositing,
Hmm.
playing on a protocol. And I think the community aspect needs to be a community. A community is not all of you join my Telegram so I can then sell you an NFT. Like, community needs to be give and take. And as people get to know each other, you know, I'm very lucky. Like, I've been building communities for a long time, and music festival is a real community because you've got all of the different people, from the volunteers checking tickets to the sound people. And I think in as the Web3 community grows, building your own little community, and that's where picking the right chain for you to live in is very important. If you're really into gaming, Avax could be a great community base for you to join.
Hmm.
Or Sui at the moment, they're doing a lot in the gaming, and they've got their new console coming out, and I'm seeing a lot of gaming people really bond in that community, and community is, like, other projects are a good person to have in your community. Like, how can you collab with them? There's obviously going to be, the KOLs, the YouTubers, the people with reach. They're a wonderful fuel to your fire. In Web
Mm.
two, we do Google ads, or we do fake Instagram and fake Meta ads. A Meta ad for a new DEX on a chain no one's heard of when they haven't got Coinbase is a
Hmm.
really far away place to engage someone. So,
Yeah.
thinking about where people hang out, we love Reddit. There's a lot
Hmm.
of there's a lot of things happening on Reddit. Obviously, we love Twitter, but we know the Twitter audience is a bit of an echo chamber.
Hmm.
Definitely playing around with TikTok, and then of course IRL. So I run Zebu Live, which is the UK's flagship Web3 event, and we have trying to get 4,500 people this year.
Mm.
And as we go into the fifth year, there's a real community of people that have been every year. Their projects have changed, their job roles have changed, but they're all coming together, and
Yeah.
I think, in another world, I remember we were told, like, there's above, you got a marketing strategy and a digital marketing strategy, which is basically above the line and below the line. Now
Hmm.
most people are going through the line, and I think it's very, very similar in Web3. You've got, above the line and below the line, and now we want to take it through the line. Like,
It's
meet you
yeah.
at a
No, I hear you. I'm talking with a couple of projects where they're kind of viewing a contrast between um, you know th- one project that I'm speaking with. They have a product that meets the needs of kind of the Web2 audience, enterprises. So it's a B2B play, but they also have a token, and so they're trying to meet the needs of the crypto audience. And so what we're talking about is, what if we approach this like holistically, because what excites the crypto audience could be the very same things that excite the enterprises. And so, like, what are those things? And so, there's this kind of a reconciling kind of approach that I'm trying to take. You mentioned in passing that you guys love Reddit, and I've met with many growth leaders that really struggle with the fact that Twitter it is an echo chamber. But that's where a lot of crypto people hang out, and a lot of these growth leaders are looking for other channels to reach audiences. And why do you guys love Reddit? And tell us kind of maybe some strategies that the audience could learn from.
Yeah, I think a lot of people ask me what channel they should live in. Should they live in Discord? Should they live in Telegram? Should they live in Twitter? Should they be on Reddit? Should they be on TikTok? And I think the core thing is to pick where you're going to be. and especially when you're a small team, do it really well. Each channel, the content needs to be really different. You know, what you post on LinkedIn is not a copy and paste to Twitter. It's not a copy and paste to Reddit. You know, like Reddit is not a place for shilling. Reddit is a place for, like, especially when it was on the developer outreach, it's a place to talk in depth, add value, build confidence, and slowly start to capture mind share. And I think, you know, there's definite certain channels where big developers and core people hang out. I agree with you. Twitter is a real echo chamber. The amount of like real people on there are all in there. And if we look at like kind of what's happening at the moment with the sort of no new capital coming into the space, it is a bit of like this narrative's hot and everyone's cycling out of the old. You know, it is kind of going and trying to capture your mind share. And you know, I think you touched on a really tricky point. You know, we worked on quite a few real world asset projects, you know, and some of them are still going and doing really well. Like, we'd love to see VeChain and its sort of resurgence come back. And you know, they've got a Mika license, but for a long time, real world assets are quite boring in the sense that it's real, so the yield is going to be real. And it's been, you know, and especially in 2021 when you're like everything's giving crazy returns and it's going to rip. It's hard for a real world asset to rip in the same way because it's real, isn't that? And so I think in and then the second point on that is we all kind of have ADHD a little bit. I actually do have ADHD, but I do think as I do think that as a crypto audience, engaging your audience when building a blockchain takes a long time. You know, building this tech that actually works takes a long time, and if you are building that for an enterprise, keeping a token live and interesting and not just straight down is very tricky. And they are, you know, they are different strategies, aren't they? Because it is really, really hard, especially in this market, for tokens to go up. And I think that can really affect a community. That being said, your strongest community do come back, and we love building, you know, your 100 core fans, your 100 core users. How are we bringing them in? How are they becoming an ambassador? Ambassador programs are one of these things that are really good, but they take a long time. You know, they are not your bang, smash it on and go. But if you build a good ambassador program, it's a great core for the community.
Yeah. In ambassador programs that you've seen in the past, or maybe you've had a hand in helping to build, how do you continue to incentivize, or I guess how have ambassadors been incentivized to continue supporting the project? Have you maybe tell us a range of kinds of ways to incentivize them?
Yes, I think there's a mixture. There's some people that are like heavy token holders and big believers in the project and want to help. There's certain people that are incentivized by token bounties, which I think is a great way. And there's certain people that they just really enjoyed it and they've enjoyed being selected as an ambassador. It's a good first role for someone in crypto, isn't it? You know, starting to get into a community, getting on the inner side. I think they're a long play. I think they're a play that you need a lot of resource to manage 100 people. We know people don't do what you want. You know, when I send out a company survey, I'm like, please can you put in your feedback? I know I need to go through the same 12 people to make sure they do. You know, like it's a lot of work to manage them. But I think if you get a good community of ambassadors and you give them roles and you give them opportunities to feed back on the product, you know, I think a lot of people in Web3 don't, because a lot of it's been so early, they don't ask their core users what they want, you know. And I just finished reading the Netflix No Rules. He was saying how one dev is better than 1,000 bad devs because they think about what the real problem that you're trying to solve is, and it's not building what they were going to build. It's actually flipping the solution. You can do it with 2 lines of code on the weekend and get to the problem that you want to solve. And I think while we're still figuring this all out, and you know, a lot of the problems that we didn't know in ETH, we didn't know what we didn't know. If we remember 2014, 15, coin market cap, it was like Bitcoin forked and forks, and Litecoin, Bitcoin, there's lots of forks of the same thing. And then obviously we had Ethereum come along, and then we've got zero knowledge proof and the L2s, and trying to get all of that to click. We're still kind of figuring out how that works. And I think understanding how that's actually going to work and doing that with your core community quickly. They actually love to help. People do love to help. Of course, you then got to listen, and no one likes to give feedback and then not get involved.
Yeah. In one of your answers earlier, you shared a number of milestones. You really described a funnel where someone would join a Discord and then connect their wallet. When you're talking to clients and potential projects, many of them, from my experience, um, in Web 2, it's very easy to define like what the funnel looks like, what awareness looks like, what the next stage looks like, what call to actions are. In Web 3, it's less clear. So
Yeah.
how do you help clients figure out where they are in terms of like what funnel structure makes the most sense for them?
Yeah, because if we look at the funnel, it's a completely new funnel. Because I know you, I don't know where you live. I don't know that your name's Pete. I wouldn't know
Hmm.
your name, and maybe I would know your name in Web 2, but
Hmm.
I would know your age, your demographic. You could work out your salary based on where you're living. We're interacting with a lot of with unknown wallets. On chain, very very limited information, and I think that's. And I don't know if you've got 19 wallets or one wallet. So
Hmm.
I think understanding that funnel. So we started to use Kyoto AI, which has really helped for Mindshare. We're using Cookie 3. We're using Safari. We got a new tool called Grow 3. So we kind of built out our tech stack on our side,
Hmm.
to try and start to look at on-chain data. A lot of building that funnel and working out what do we actually want them to do. And sometimes it's telling people not to spend money until they're ready,
Yeah.
because re-engagement is almost more expensive than acquisition.
Yeah.
If I do get you from a podcast or a KOL post or an event where I sponsor an event, and then you've joined the Discord, and then you've gone on the DApp, which I guess is kind of technically where marketing should end, isn't it? Once I've got eyeballs on a website, it's really down to the product.
Hmm.
And if I go to connect my wallet and I just get a spinning wheel of doom, I'm like, well, that wasn't any good anyway. That was overhyped. I'm not coming. It's going to take me a lot of like mind share to get me to come back. So I think, and a lot of what we've been thinking about recently, and kind of to your previous point, is if we've got a B2B product, do we want to launch with a token, or do we want to try and raise money from a VC,
Hmm.
get the B2B product a lot further along, and then use the token as an acquisition method later down the line? Because I think a lot of early ICOs, one page websites with Ethereum addresses were like, send money
Hmm.
here and hoping you're getting tokens. But I think what we're seeing a lot more is people are pushing off their token launch as far as they physically can and trying to raise or boost, a lot. I think the cool thing that we're seeing in the projects that are coming to us, they're coming with an MVP, they're coming with a prototype,
Hmm.
they've got some users, versus when they were just coming with a white paper. And I think that's because the advancements of the whole space have happened so quickly that you can fork a lot of things.
Hmm.
Like a vesting contract can be pre-written for you in order to do all that stuff. So I think it's a lot easier to get closer to a working MVP. So
Hmm.
I do think understanding really what the actions you want to do, how valuable each action is, and making sure what your Luna was so clearly worked out. Like we had a very clever data scientist, and it would be like $12 for an email sign up,
Hmm.
$40 for KYC, $100 for a first trade, and $150 for the third trade. And we could literally see it go all the way through. I think a lot of you even see it with ZK Sync and their wild marketing last year, is that they didn't really know what they wanted everyone to do. They were promoting their launch. The launch was quite a tricky launch, and it's like they're still trying to find that product market fit.
Mm-hmm. What before we go into the case studies on the Flight 3 website, maybe I can ask one last question around product market fit. Because in crypto, there's the product that the project is building, whether it be a DEX or some kind of application. But in many cases, though most won't admit it, the token is also a product. And so when you're speaking of product market fit, what are you saying?
Product market fit is where we're solving a problem, isn't it? Like I always think of the coffee machines you get all around the world with the little pods
Mm-hmm.
you put in, and you can just about always get it to fill in. If we need the CEO of the protocol to explain what it does and why we need it, it's not there, and I think I love to think of the method of iceberging, where you've got this tiny thing at the top. Like if we look at a project like Subsquid, which is indexing for the blockchain, the Google of blockchain. It
Mm.
allows you to search block. I mean, I'm not technical on this. I'm sure there's loads of things that SQD actually does, but its heart, it is the Google of blockchain. It allows you to, if you're a developer, you can find all the different things really quickly, like kind of like a library. And I think we've had there's a lot of L1s that are struggling with transactions. There's a lot of DeFi protocols that are good ideas, but there's just not enough liquidity and transactions going through that they actually make sense. Like it is a cool idea, but it's not sort of flowing, and we're not
Mm-hmm.
really solving a real issue yet. And I think, do people want to use it? Our goal is, our dream is to build work on a WhatsApp or Uber type product where it's something that everybody uses in their daily lives every single day.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things that makes me really interested about that is it doesn't, and this could be the way the Web3 goes, it doesn't necessarily need to be a human that does that. What with these AI agents and these AI wallets, they don't even
Mm-hmm.
need a jazzy front end. You can get back to building cool stuff. So it's intriguing to see how that integration will happen.
Mm-hmm. Let's go to the case studies page of Flight 3. You've got a number of projects here that are former clients or current clients. You've got Coinbase, VE Chain, Solana, Google, Fabric, VC, Fuel. Just lots of clients. And maybe take us through one story of a client, like maybe what their needs were at the time and what Flight 3 did to help them along the way.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll start at the top. Coinbase and Stand with Crypto. The cool thing about our industry is that we're still all trying to help build it. Like I think one of the problems we have is that if you haven't used crypto, it's hard to regulate crypto.
Mm-hmm.
So Stand with Crypto's goal is to, well, it's quite, in the US, it was a very aggressive body. It was literally fighting a body of the Gary Gensler, the SEC, who were trying to shut down crypto. And
Right.
so the brief in the UK was, we've actually got a crypto curious government. They're
Yeah.
like, they're British, so they're a bit more conservative. They're like, we like the sound of it. We don't understand this, and we're going to be very cautious. So our goal here, our goal there is not to like fight the government. It's more to educate, inspire, and bring our industry together so we can be one collective voice. So really cool. It's got all of the big exchanges, like my mentor made blockchain.com, a guy called Nick Carey. So brought him in, and we brought, I think we were at nearly 100 partners. So we helped build the website, we helped with branding,
So
helped
this
with the
is
event.
standwithcrypto.org.
Standwithcrypto.org, the UK version.
Got it.
And yeah, it's been an amazing project. We run events at Parliament, and we've had one of my investors, Stephen Bartlett, came and did a talk. Sorry, came and did a talk. Really relied on our design experience, community building, and really relied on, like, considering, because we've got a lot of companies that could be competing, but
Yeah,
actually
yeah, yeah.
they've all come together and they've all been really really helpful, and they're all trying to make the UK scene better. So I really really enjoyed that type of project, because it uses a full range of the community building, of the design, of the growth, of the data. So that's a really interesting one, and we're going into our second year. So it's great to see the the exciting thing is the progress of
Yeah.
seeing, nothing hurts a team more if you slog away at it and it doesn't quite hit a raise cap, or the team pivot. So very, very excited about that. If we look at like Fabric, that's where, we build a lot of websites, and, that's bringing your brand to life. So Fabric's a VC, and we love working with VCs because they've got great deal flow, lots of good projects where they can kind of pre-vet them,
Hmm.
and I think a lot of our internal marketing
Yeah.
for Flight 3 is we're actually word of mouth. So people are like, "Oh, you should speak to these guys," and we're like, "Oh, we should speak to them," and so that's a great thing. So I love doing that. And then VChain, we're doing a lot of social marketing, and really trying to. They've got a really cool new. I mean, they've been doing RWA since 2017. They're a very OG project.
Hmm.
They've got some really exciting part. I love making real life content. Because they've got a good big partnership with the UFC. Dana
Mm.
White has joined, so it's a great way to get people making content that's fun and almost organic,
Hmm.
sharing VeChain, but like not just shilling it.
Yeah.
Then the token price is not the end goal. It's letting people know that they're here, they're exciting, they've got all of these things happening, without just kind of like, you know. In some ways, I like to get people like to say this project's bad and start
Hmm.
fights, because it's a bit like when you get a reference check by a new person and they're like 11 out of 10. You're like,
Yeah.
okay, so you best friends, almost a 7.9 is more realistic.
Let me ask about that. Because I think when VeChain made the announcement they're now sponsors of the UFC. I think people question like what's motivating them to do that? Like, what do they see in the UFC crowd? Do they see the UFC crowd as crypto curious, and potentially holders or buyers of the VE chain token? I guess what's the
Yeah,
motivation there?
I think sports is such a good crossover.
Yeah.
I think, 25 to 40, 50-year-old audience, like there's a lot of cool stuff happening in crypto, and, our company's 52% women, which is really, really cool. But I do still think it's predominantly a male audience. Um, and I think we've seen with the F1, like if you watch the F1 at the moment, it's hard not to spot the crypto logos on the cars. I think
Right.
I was actually involved, or my friend was involved in, I was following it closely and sponsoring music events. But if you think of a music event, I'm going to a dark room to to lose the stress of a day-to-day work and listen to music, or listen to a concert, or watch a show. Whereas if I'm at a football box, or if I'm at the F1, or if I'm at a fight, I probably can put a bet on. You know, it's kind of, it's there. You're active. You've got headspace to think about that type of thing.
Hmm.
So I don't know 100% the reason why they went to do it, but as an audience, I think sports is a great audience, in that there's a lot of sports betting. So there is a crossover, and then the second part is people really love sport. You know,
Yeah.
it's what you call soccer, what we call football. Football in the UK is massive. OKX sponsor Man City. They're not really in the UK. They're sponsoring it for the huge global audience that's watching Man City play. Whenever it's funny, we have quite a lot of team in Cape Town, and when I go there, they have more Premier League games showing than we show in the UK, and everyone's
Mm.
wearing the full kits. And I think that's a really cool way to associate with something that people really like and
Hmm.
respect. So yes, like any sponsorship. It's you need to work hard with your assets, and I often work with Barcelona and Arsenal, and when you get their players, you need three if it's a fintech product or a gambling product, and they only let you go 35 minutes from the training ground, and you only get them for 2 hours,
Hmm.
and there's about 55 things that they can't do. So that's why it's very hard to make those kind of videos interesting.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, but it's a great brand advocacy. Like we love Cole Palmer. He's got his celebration, or Ronaldo. He did a lot with the Binance launch and stuff. He's got that. He's got the most amount of followers of anyone in the world, I believe. So attaching your brand there is a positive sort of sign that you're serious. Can afford it, and then hopefully you engage their audience.
yeah, yeah. Okay. Well, Harry, this has been really, really enlightening. I appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. I will share in the show notes all the links to flight3.xyz. Any final words you'd like to share with the audience before we get off?
Yeah, I think there's no right way to do the best marketing, and in Web3, just be authentic and be damn fast. Find out what doesn't work, and then double down on what does, and just keep going and going and going. Because when all the bits come together, it will be amazing. But it's a really, really tricky, fast-moving space.
I think those are great last words. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Cheers, man.